What happens when we divide an irrational number by another irrational number? Let's find out. So we know that square root 2 is an irrational number, and if you want to divide it by square root 3, what do we get? Well, we know square root 2 can be written as 1.414, and this number is non-terminating and non-repeating. Similarly, square root 3 is 1.732, and we get another non-terminating, non-repeating number. If you were to actually put this in a calculator and find out, what you will see is you will get a number which is non-terminating, non-repeating. That means we will get an irrational number. Now, if this question were to be given 10 times, 9 out of 10 times, we will not be asked to do this, because what is the point, right? We cannot really divide something which is going on forever and then divide by something which is also going on forever. Now, 1 out of 10 times they may ask to find this actual, the decimal expansion of this to maybe 1 or 2 decimal places. In that case, we actually will need to limit the number to a certain decimal place and then solve, right? Now, how are we going to solve it 9 out of 10 times? 9 out of 10 times, we will leave this as the answer. What do I mean by that? Remember, we had seen earlier when we multiplied square root 2 by square root 3. We saw answer was square root 6. In other words, if we have square root a, we multiply by square root b, the answer is square root of a times b. So similarly, we can say if we have square root 2 and if we have square root 3, we can write this as square root of 2 by 3. Or more generally speaking, square root of a divided by square root of b can be written as square root of a by b. So let's take a look at some more examples. Let's say we have something like square root 27 and we want to divide this by square root 6. So what will be the answer? So we are going to write this as square root of 27 by 6. And that means square root of 27. So we are going to break them into prime factors. So it will be 3 times 9, which will be again 3 times 3. And here 6 is 3 times 2. So we can cancel 3 and 3. And now we have square root of 9 by 2. Now, if you look closely, we have seen earlier that if you have 2, for every 2 common factors, 1 will come out. So we can write square root of 9 as square root of 3 times 3 by square root 2. Now, why is that? Remember, if we have square root a by square root b, we can write this as square root of a by b. Similarly, we have square root of a by b, we can write this as square root of a by square root of b, right? And then from here, we can say one of the 3's will come out, right? So we will have 3 times 1 because we will be left with square root 1, which is 1, by denominator is square root 2, or the answer is 3 over square root 2. So the answer to this question is 3 over square root 2. Now we will learn later that we almost never want to have a square root in the denominator. Or in other words, more generally speaking, we want to have the denominator show a rational value. And that process is called rationalization. And we are going to see so many examples when we start solving some of the questions on rational numbers and irrational numbers. We will explore that in more detail. But so far what we have seen is when we divide 2 irrational numbers, we are getting an irrational number here. And in this case as well, we divided 2 irrational numbers and we are getting an irrational number here. Let's take a look at some more examples. Say we have something like maybe square root 27, right? And we were to divide this by, say, square root 3. So 2 irrational numbers, right? So we can write this as square root of 27 by 3, or square root of 27 can be written as 3 times 3 times 3, and we have 3 over here, denominator. So this will cancel out, so we will have 1. Or in other words, we will have simply square root 3 times 3, and this will be square root 1, which is basically 1, and this is simply 3 over 1, or 3. In other words, here we have 2 irrational numbers, square root of irrational, like an irrational number by an irrational number, but the answer is a rational number. This is not an irrational number. Now, isn't that interesting? So let's take a look at one more example. Say we have something like maybe 2 square root 5, right? Or maybe let's make it even more interesting. 2 square root 50. And we want to divide this by 3 square root, let's say 2. So this is our question. We have 2 square root 50 and we are dividing this by 3 square root 2. I'm randomly creating these examples. Now this we can write this as, so we can write this as 2 times square root 50 divided by 3 times square root 2. Or we can say it is 2 by 3 times square root 50 over square root 2, right? Or we can say it is 2 by 3 times square root of 50 over 2, or simply 2 by 3 times, this will be square root 25. Or let's continue here. We have 2 over 3 times 25 is nothing but 5, square root of 5 times 5, and 2 by 3 times, for every 2 common factor 1 comes out, so 5 times square root 1, square root 1 is 1, so we have 2 over 3, 5 times 1. Now I know that I have literally broken down into so many steps. I'm just trying to make sure that I show you complete step by step how we solve these questions. Of course, you don't need to show all these steps. Or we have 2 over 3 times 5, which is 10 over 3. So long story short, our question was, now we know this is an irrational number. This is an irrational number because we have learned when we multiply a rational number and an irrational number, we get an irrational number. And similarly, this is an irrational number. So what happened was we took two irrational numbers, we divided one by the other, and our answer is 10 by 3. Is 10 by 3 an irrational number? Of course not. 10 by 3 is a rational number. So this is a rational number. This is another rational number. So really, what can we say? What is happening here? So what we can say is that when we divide one irrational number by another irrational number, sometimes we may get a rational number and sometimes we may get an irrational number.